Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast, coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Couple of quick housekeeping things. It's just me tonight. Aaron is a little bit under the weather, but we'll be back for the next show. A couple of housekeeping things. First off, we are going to have a show that'll publish. This show will publish here in a day or so, as always, but we'll have another show that'll publish over the weekend. Some of you may have heard parts of it. We had an issue with a show we did with Matt Brender from Intel that we were able to recover the audio. So we'll publish that again this weekend. It's a really good show about looking at telemetry and some of the stuff they were doing. Should be a little different if you may have heard bits and pieces before we had to pull it the last time. So just you're not losing your mind if you hear a show that you might have seen before. And one other thing, wanted to thank Intel for being a sponsor for the last 6 months. Been a great sponsor, been able to get us access to a lot of very, very interesting people, and want to thank them for that. So with that, tonight, want to introduce, as we love to do, sort of a brand new company called Anchore, and excited to have both Dan Nurmi, who's the CTO, and Tim Gerla, who is VP of Product. So Dan and Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here, and thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. So, Anchore, I'll let you guys sort of get into it, but, you guys have an interesting background, having been at places like Eucalyptus and Ansible and some other companies that, really kind of shaped the early definitions of what's going on with cloud and automation and a lot of things that are going on today. Tell us about what you're doing with Anchore, and then give us a little bit of your background as well, so folks have a sense of the breadth of it and some of the types of things you guys have worked on before.
Sure. I can talk a little bit about the team briefly, and then Dan can talk about some of the problems that we're solving. My name is Tim. I spent some time at Eucalyptus with Dan and Saeed Ziawani, the other co-founder and CEO of the company. Saeed and I went on to found Ansible with the creator of the Ansible open source project, Michael DeHaan, in 2013. We subsequently sold the company to Red Hat, as you've probably seen in the news, and we started looking for our next venture. And I was always looking forward to working with Dan again, and Saeed and I. So we called him up and started throwing some ideas around. Dan, do you want to intro yourself and talk about the company a bit?
Sure. So this is Dan Nurmi. So I met, as Tim mentioned, I met these guys at Eucalyptus Systems. I was a co-founder of Eucalyptus, and we started that back in 2008, doing private cloud platforms. And Eucalyptus was acquired by Hewlett-Packard in 2014, and since then worked there for a bit, and met back up with Tim and Saeed, and was super excited to start a new venture here in Anchore. And, everything pretty much aligned just right for us to get together and start something new with Anchore. And it's great to get started. We just launched the company about a week and a half ago.
Yeah, so I saw that. It popped on our radar partially because Tim's based out here in North Carolina, so we always like to find a good set of people building some cool technology locally. But give us a sense, what's Anchore working on, the kind of the core technology, and what's the problem you guys are trying to solve out in the marketplace?
Sure. Basically, what Anchore is up to, we're focused primarily in the container deployment space, so production container deployments, and really. The challenges that we're looking to solve are based around a couple of observations that we and others have made. That the first one stemming from the observation that container-based systems have been adopted very, very quickly, and adoption is increasing in enterprise and in other areas as well. And there's a lot of reasons why this is happening, but it's happening really fast and in a big way. Very, very solid adoption going on in container-based systems. And one of the primary reasons that we found why organizations are so enthusiastic about container-based systems stems from this promise of having a developer organization doing the work, whatever they're doing, having ideas very quickly, doing all of the work on a local environment, using a container-based system to essentially throw all that work into a commit, and then having a very rapid feedback between doing the work and getting that work into production, getting feedback from that, doing more work, and continuing the cycle. So this ultra rapid from idea to production is a very attractive feature of container-based systems. Now, one of the ways in which organizations are trying to realize that benefit really stems from an idea of automation. So, having human beings in the middle between having an idea and getting stuff into production can certainly slow down that process. In order to really realize that speed, you need a very rapid automated pipeline, get from an application development all the way through to this thing running in production, rinse and repeat. And so with that automation, the way that containers work, there's a little bit of a shift of control. One of the ways that you can realize this is, developers have an awful lot of control about what software, what dependencies, what versions of things they can pull into their container environment in order to have essentially what amounts to an encapsulated unit of work that can be pushed along this pipeline all the way through to production. But shifting that control also leads to a little bit of an opaque situation where a container is a unit of work. It's a bit opaque, and once you get something like this in place, we've seen some potential users and customers realize that that opacity is a little bit daunting in terms of what's in the containers, what software versions really are going on, how are we going to manage the container sprawl at the end of the day. And so some of these tensions have sort of arisen when considering going all in and getting a lot of development teams to adopt a container-based system all the way through to production. Yep. And so what Anchore is really going after is we want to give particularly ops and security organizations the tools they need to really be able to inspect and control container workloads as they're passing through these pipelines without losing the ability to implement a fast automated pipeline. So not having to ask people to adopt a really intrusive infrastructure component, but rather give people tools and services they can use to get that level of inspection and control to make the whole thing, very transparent, very predictable.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're starting to see that kind of rear its head. Last year, what we sort of like to say was the year that the Docker hype was really big. It was it was just sort of the idea of people using Docker, trying to figure out how to get it in production. This year seems to have been a little more reality getting thrown in. So I mean, we're seeing numbers can be put out there like 60-70% of all of the images that are on public Docker Hub are infected in some way or a security vulnerability in some way. We've seen some of the public registries go down where people can't get to things, and they're sort of going, okay, I gotta start to think about that, placement of registry in terms of, availability. And then, like you said, just it's a different paradigm where the developers can kind of go, look, I can kind of package all my dependencies together, and I'm sort of handing off this, not necessarily a black box, but kind of a gray box off to operations. Mm-hmm. And they're going, You want me to operate this? You want me to make sure it runs properly, it runs fast, and it's secure, and it's a lot of opportunities for potential problems in there. So kind of with that setup, where does Anchore fit in here to sort of help minimize that or mitigate those challenges?
Yeah. So one of the places that's about the Anchore technology specifically that we're developing, and we've landed a version already, is essentially broken into a couple of different pieces. So in this particular problem area, one of the pieces leverages some of the unique characteristics of the way containers work, and to do some pretty interesting stuff. So right now, there's an Anchore tool that you can take any generic pipeline as long as the tool has access to a container as it's coming through a pipeline. We can take that container and really do a bunch of analysis. We can take that container, unpack it, look at it, and gather a ton of information about that guy as it's coming through. And this can be done in parallel as that pipeline continues moving forward. Then later in the pipeline, when there's a point at which decisions have to be made, are we putting this container into production, or are we going to stop it right now? We can use all of the information that we gathered to answer some really interesting questions. Is there a present security vulnerability that maybe just came out that this container is susceptible to? Is it violating some best practices policy that the organization has put in place? Things about modifying certain files or having certain attributes inside of the containers being this way or that way. We have a pretty lightweight policy engine for that kind of thing. And so we both have an analysis point and we have a control point. And our tool for this is an example of one of the things that Anchore offers to users.
Okay. So yeah, that was one of the things I was trying to figure out as I was looking at the company was, is it more on the registry side of things? So it's driving the thing that's sitting there that potentially could get picked up. Is it integrating into the CI/CD systems? Like kind of where in those steps it is. And it sounds like it's going to fit into a number of places because you've got multiple places where vulnerabilities could get introduced. Is that?
Yep,
okay?
That's absolutely true. And we also offer tools for handling a registry as well. As you referred to before, there's some concern in some organizations about from where are these containers coming, right, in the first place. And we have some tools that help users curate or start with a solid baseline of container-based images, and having that baseline with Anchore, it includes all of the analytics and all the analysis that we've done over these containers from the get-go. And so being able to correlate what your developers are doing all the way back to a set of known state-based images is something that Anchore offers as well.
And where do you get the information from that sort of, either builds black and white lists for you or is giving you that, kind of go, no go, where does that sort of big set of, big database of the good guys and the bad guys live, and how do you intelligently build that over time to keep track of what's going on in the world?
So, I guess it depends a little bit because what we're really focused on right now is making sure that we have a framework that's pretty flexible. Okay. So some of our initial policies are ones that are completely customizable. They're things that a particular organization might care about and they might not care about. So we offer the ability to really customize what those gating functions based on policies look like. And the data sources we're getting from, we've got a back-end engine that's constantly watching things like, current CVEs and popular distribution bug reports and security lists and things like that.
Okay. So where does so there's various things that are popping into the market that are, trying to provide security. Sometimes it's kind of a complete stack approach. Other places, especially in the container world, we're seeing a lot of modularity, modularity in a lot of things. We're seeing it in security. We're seeing it in networking. How do you guys see yourselves fitting into the container ecosystem? Is it, are there sort of known places that'll plug into things like Kubernetes and Docker and Mesos and so forth, or is it kind of agnostic to those systems and it can kind of go anywhere? Or how do you see yourselves fitting into the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, I can take that one. So the broader ecosystem with Anchore, our objective is to be very platform agnostic. We're really focused on what's going on inside of containers because that's a space where I think we're particularly interested in, and we think solving some of the problems that stem from a bit of opacity with containers will have great benefit. Right? It'll help people to adopt container-based systems faster, which is really what we're after. We want to see this technology get into production and solve a lot of the problems to get there. So toward that end, we want to be as agnostic as we can be. And so far, that's definitely an achievable goal because of where we fit in the space. Yeah. What's in the container, not necessarily how they're being executed, how they're being scheduled,
gotcha.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I've seen, and we've talked to a number of companies who kind of come to market. They're excited about this idea that they're gonna help developers because developers are the new kingmakers, and the reality is, the tools that they make probably are more should be in the tool belt of operations, of the security team, of the network team, and I think it makes sense to make those more modular than sort of built in to where there's this expectation that only the developers are going to run this, or it only works if you have this sort of blended team where the developers are writing code and doing ops, and so it's a smart way to look at the challenge because it's still so new in these container environments that you want to have as much kind of flexibility as possible sometimes.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of churn, and there's great technology, and everything has its own strengths. But one of the things that we're trying to find these commonalities, and we think one of the commonalities is exactly here. And with Anchore, the kind of information that we're offering to a user of some of the tools that we're building is interesting to ops and security and valuable. It might be of interest even to the developers themselves, and we would like nothing more than for a team to kind of rally around some of the information that Anchore is able to provide, to have a common language to figure out how to make things go faster, better.
Right. Yeah, there was a really good episode of another podcast called Arrested DevOps, and there's a guy named Pete Chesok who runs ThreatStack, who was sort of saying, look, there's a new mindset out there when you have all these dependencies, not that you didn't have them previously with Linux systems, but when you start bundling them in new ways and packaging them in new ways, you're going to create these new kind of stumbling points that maybe you didn't have before, and you've got to have the systems in place that'll sort of give you feedback to go, okay, don't try not to make that mistake again, and oh, by the way, automate it away or automate it in a way that you're not going to, like you said, put a human in there to make that mistake anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk a little bit, I was reading about the product and the technology. You guys talk about sort of a reporting and management framework. How do you see that fitting in? What are the, as you talk to people in the market, you talk to potential customers, what other sorts of systems or tools do they then take that data and feed it into? What's it, are there other, audit and compliance systems that they typically feed into? Is it, is there a common thing that CISOs are looking for you to kind of integrate with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the clearest point of integration is going to be along the CI/CD chain, right? And that's going to be a little bit separate from the reporting and analysis framework. My goal or our goal is to make the data that Anchore has as flexible and available as possible to different platforms and to different environments. I think it's a little bit early to say, exactly where things will fit in, and I think some of the specific connection points and specific interoperability characteristics will become a little clearer as we get a little further down the road with the product. But one of the goals that we have is definitely to provide, and I think Dan used these words, visibility and transparency into things container related, specifically things that are in your containers. So we will definitely have a reporting framework of some sort, and I think for larger scale deployments, we'll probably find ways to export that data in ways that can be, sliced and diced and manipulated in more advanced ways.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that, the industry's struggling with a little bit is, you've got so much innovation going on. And then there's always the question of, how do you turn this into a viable business? So, people will talk about how big the Docker community is, and then it's okay. How do you commercialize that or Kubernetes or whatever? You guys obviously have a bunch of background in that from Eucalyptus days and Ansible days. It looks to me, at least it wasn't obvious. Does Anchore right now sort of non-open source model in terms of the early product, or is it just a matter of, is that something that you guys feel like is necessary in this space, or you feel comfortable with the product the way it is just a commercial offering?
Oh, the whole team here, we're really passionate about open source, big believers in that. So there will be an Anchore open source component. Okay. We're still working out some of the details there, but I think a lot of the analysis tools will be open source. A lot of the places where people might want to plug in their own modules and tools into the system will be open source. We are planning on having some hosted services, some software as a service platforms to help people manage their container registries and do some of the data visualization and analysis. And I think that those parts will probably be paid and commercial, but there will be a big component or several big components that will be open source.
Okay, yeah, and the reason I ask is I don't really know what the right answer is. I know there's obviously people who are incredibly passionate about it, and then you look at, there's a number of companies today who are in the security space. You look at like Bromium for endpoints, or Illumio, or Palo Alto Networks, or a number of others who they're just saying, look, I'm just providing great products. And so I don't, it feels like, especially with security, maybe there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer there. I was just kind of curious if it was a trend, or but that's good to hear that you guys sort of have an approach and a passion to both making the technology available, but also making it viably commercially, which is great. Now how will you go to market? What's the early way that people can start engaging with you guys? I heard you mention there's sort of a SaaS offering. That you just came out. What's the early engagement model for anybody who's interested in the product or the technology?
Dan, you want that one, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, sure. Yeah, good question. We're still early in the process. We're working on some proofs of concept, some cotton thread design. I think the first thing that you'll see is a little bit more concrete product information on the website. It's a little bit sparse right now, but we're working hard on solidifying some of that. We will probably first offer some software downloads, some quick and easy installs for people to start kicking the tires. I don't want to commit on a timeline there yet, but stay tuned. I think over the next few weeks and months, we'll be incrementally adding more information there, and hopefully at some point this summer you'll be able to get your hands on it. There will be a couple different components, like you mentioned, the SaaS platform and some command line tools that run on probably the operations people's workstations, things like that. The details are a little fuzzy right now, but we'll hopefully have some more information up there soon.
Okay. And
yeah. In the meantime, on our website, we've got a beta list, and we'd like nothing more than for people to come and check out our white paper and look at the beta list, sign up, and we'll have some software available, and those who sign up on the beta list will be some of the first that we reach out to see if they'd like to be friendly users and check out our tech.
Okay, very cool. So we'll have the homepage in the show notes, Anchore.com. Where do you guys expect that you'll be out and about maybe this summer? Will you be at places like DockerCon or places where people can bump into you and talk face to face and maybe see some early technology?
Yeah, we're definitely going to be at DockerCon. We'll be at ContainerCon, probably at VMworld, and a number of other places. So we'll definitely be around, and we've got T-shirts, so you'll see our logo.
Excellent. Well, cool. Well, listen, guys, this has been good. It's, this is definitely a space that, like we talked about, is evolving really quickly. And I think, it feels very much like 2016 is becoming a year where, people are trying to figure out, we know there's all this pent up demand from developers. It's making their lives easier to kind of package it, get it from desktop into some other, state, QA, test, production, whatever. But the operations teams need some good, cool technology. They need some powerful technology, and they're looking for the things that are going to help them. So this is really good timing, and We appreciate you guys coming on and telling us about it. Any sort of last words we can pass along to people in terms of, kind of what to watch out for, or just some areas that you guys are really interested in kind of trying to solve?
I think the best thing is what Tim just mentioned. We're real early, but we're going to be adding a lot of content to our website real soon, and that'll include things like a walkthrough of the technology. If you have a Docker installation, here's how you use Anchore technology. Here's what the some of the questions you can ask and have answered by the tech. Here's what some of the analysis of this data can offer you. Here's the control points. Complete walkthrough kind of information like that's going to be coming out real soon, followed by some actual software that you can get your hands on and try out yourself.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, listen, it's great to have you guys on. It's always great to see people who kind of are continually innovating, have done this before, been successful in building companies and are building the next thing. So really excited to have you guys on. Thank you for being on tonight. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. For Aaron and Tim and Dan, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.